Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's been quite a few days, I think 3 or 4 maybe, since I have read anything. These are not prescription, these are coming from the dollar store. So if you need them, you need them. Reading The Hobbit by Tolkien, and I just read the last few sentences. I remembered that Bilbo discovered he can now be invisible. Gollum kind of let the cat out of the bag about how he lost the ring like maybe a couple of hours beforehand, and now he's very suspicious and paranoid. And he thinks he knows that Bilbo has it. So, but Gollum is blocking the way to his escape. So he's just kind of let off the key. 7 right, yes. 6 left, yes. The little pathway. If you're one of those type readers, this is how far we've come. We took a few days off. Okay, so he says, this is the way, and I'm on page 92. I'm just going to jump back in. If you're wondering why I did my workout, it's January 1st, 2024. I did my workout. That clears my head, whatever it is for you. And now I can get into reading. Let's see. So here is the passage. He peered in and shrank back, but we doesn't go in, precious. No, we doesn't. Goblins is down there. Lots of goblins is. We smells them. What shall we do? Curse them and crush them. We must wait here, precious. Wait a bit and see. So they came to a dead stop. Gollum had brought Bilbo to the way out after all, but Bilbo could not get in. There was Gollum sitting humped up right in the opening, and his eyes gleamed cold in his head as he swayed it from side to side between his knees. Bilbo crept away from the wall more quietly than a mouse, but Gollum stiffened at once and sniffed, and his eyes went green. He hissed softly but menacingly. He could not see the hobbit, but now he was on the alert, and he had other senses that the darkness had sharpened, hearing and smell. So, while the ring masks your sight, Gollum knows that you're still there, so he's using his other senses to find him. And remember, he's already paranoid. He seemed to be crouched right down with his flat hands splayed on the floor, and his head thrust out, nose almost to the stone. Though he was only a black shadow in the gleam of his own eyes, Bilbo could see or feel that he was tense as a bowstring gathered for a spring. Bilbo almost stopped breathing. He went stiff himself. He was desperate. He must get away, out of this horrible darkness, while he had any strength left. He must fight. He must stab the foul thing, put its eyes out, kill it. It meant to kill him. No, not a fair fight. He was invisible now. Gollum had no sword. Gollum had not actually threatened to kill him or tried yet, and he was miserable, alone, lost. He doesn't really understand Gollum, the depths that Gollum will go to yet. A sudden understanding, a pity mixed with horror, welled up in Bilbo's heart. A glimpse of endless, unmarked days, without light or hope of betterment, hard stone, cold fish, sneaking and whispering. All these thoughts passed in a flash of a second. This reminds me really quickly, Mr. Beast did a 7-day stint in solitary confinement, and while he wasn't like a Gollum, he said it was very depriving of him of just having no stimulation except a conveyor belt. So sympathy, yes, because it all passed for us in like 30 minutes. Okay, he trembled, and then quite suddenly, in another flash, as if lifted by a new strength and resolve, he leaped. Not great leap for a man, but a leap in the dark. Straight over Gollum's head he jumped, 7 feet forward and 3 in the air. Indeed, had he known it, he only just missed cracking his skull on the low arch of the passage. Gollum threw himself backwards and grabbed as the hobbit flew over him, but too late. His hand snapped on thin air, and Bilbo, falling fair on his sturdy feet, sped off down the new tunnel. He did not turn to see what Gollum was doing. There was a hissing and cursing almost at his heels at first. Then it stopped. All at once, there came a blood-curdling shriek, filled with hatred and despair. Gollum was defeated. He dared go no further. He had lost his prey, and lost to the only thing he ever cared for, his precious. The cry brought Bilbo's heart to his mouth, but still he held on. Now faint as an echo, but menacing, the voice came behind. Thief, thief, thief. Bagginses, we hates it, we hates it, we hates it forever. Then there was a silence. But that too seemed menacing to Bilbo. If goblinses are so near that he smelt them, he thought, then they'll have heard his shrieking and cursing. Careful now, or this way will lead you to worse things. That was his thought. He didn't say it out loud. The passage was low and roughly made. It was not too difficult for the hobbit, except when, in spite of all care, he stubbed his poor toes again several times on nasty, jagged stones in the floor. A bit low for goblins, at least for the big ones, thought Bilbo, not knowing that even the big ones, the orcs of the mountains, go along at a great speed, stooping low with their hands almost on the ground. Soon the passage that had been sloping down began to go up again, and after a while it climbed steeply. That slowed Bilbo down. But at last the slope stopped, and the passage turned a corner and dipped down again. And there at the bottom of a short incline he saw, filtering round another corner, a glimpse of light. Not red light as of fire or lantern, but a pale out-of-doors sort of light. Then Bilbo began to run. Scuttling as fast as his legs would carry him, he turned the last corner and came suddenly right into an open space, where the light, after all that time in the dark, seemed dazzlingly bright. Really, it was only a leak of sunshine in through a doorway, where a great door, a stone door, was left standing open. Bilbo blinked, and then suddenly he saw the goblins in full armor with drawn swords, sitting just inside the door and watching it with wide eyes and watching the passage that led to it. They were aroused, alert, ready for anything. They saw him sooner than he saw them. Yes, they saw him. Whether it was an accident or a last trick of the ring before it took a new master, it was not on his finger. With yells of delight, the goblins rushed upon him. A pang of fear and loss, like an echo of Gollum's misery, smote Bilbo, and forgetting even to draw his sword, he stuck his hands into his pockets, and there was the ring still in his left pocket, and he slipped it on his finger. The goblins stopped short. They could not see a sign of him. He had vanished. They yelled twice as loud as before, but not so delightedly. "Where is it?" they cried. "Go back up the passage," someone shouted. "This way," someone yelled. "That way," the others yelled. "Look out for the door," bellowed the captain. Whistles blew, armor clashed, swords rattled, goblins cursed and swore and ran hither and thither, falling over one another and getting very angry. There was a terrible outcry, to-do, and disturbance. Bilbo was dreadfully frightened, but he had the sense to understand what had happened and to sneak behind a big barrel which held drink for the goblin guards, and so get out of the way and avoid being bumped into, trampled to death, or caught by feel. "I must get to the door. I must get to the door," he kept on saying to himself. But it was a long time before he ventured to try. Then it was a horrible game of blind man's bluff. The place was full of goblins running about, and the poor little hobbit dodged this way and that, was knocked over by a goblin who could not make out what he had bumped into, scrambled away on all fours, slipped between the legs of a captain just in time, got up and ran for the door. So he's invisible, but he's still there, and the goblins can still grab him if they figure it out. And I don't know how smart goblins are, or if they know that they've been living with Gollum all this time. But we'll see. It was still ajar, but a goblin had pushed it nearly to. Bilbo struggled, but he could not move it. He tried to squeeze through the crack. He squeezed, and he stuck. It was awful. His buttons had gotten wedged on the edge of the door and the doorpost. He could see outside into the open air. There were a few steps running down into a narrow valley between tall mountains. The sun came out from behind a cloud and shone bright on the outside of the door, but he could not get through. So imagine this. They can't see him. He's stuck in the door. What happens if they close the door? Suddenly, one of the goblins inside shouted, "There is a shadow by the door. Something is outside." Bilbo's heart jumped into his mouth. He gave a terrific squirm. Buttons burst off in all directions. He was through with a torn coat and waistcoat, leaping down the steps like a goat, while bewildered goblins were still picking up his nice brass buttons on the doorstep. So I guess once they're off of Bilbo, they reappear. Of course, they soon came down after him, hooting and hallooing and hunting among the trees. But they don't like the sun. It makes their legs wobble and their heads giddy. They could not find Bilbo with the ring on, slipping in and out of the shadow of the trees, running quick and quiet, and keeping out of the sun. So soon they went back, grumbling and cursing to guard the door. Bilbo had escaped. So that's the bottom of page 95. We made it to chapter 6. It says, out of the frying pan into the fire. So that kind of alludes to the next problem. So chapter 6, and we don't know what has happened to the dwarves and to Gandalf, but Bilbo has the ring now. Bilbo had escaped the goblins, but he did not know where he was. He had lost hood, cloak, food, pony, his buttons, and his friends. He wandered on till the sun began to sink westward behind the mountains. And behind the mountain is in italics, so maybe he's going the wrong way. Their shadows fell across Bilbo's path, and he looked back. Then he looked forward, and he could see before him only ridges and slopes, falling towards lowlands and plains, glimpsed occasionally between the trees. So he's not immune to the elements. He's still going to get cold and rained on. Good heavens, he exclaimed. I seem to have got right to the other side of the misty mountains. right to the edge of the land beyond. Where, oh, where can Gandalf and the dwarves have got to? I only hope to goodness they are not still back there in the power of the goblins. He still wandered on, out of the little high valley, over its edge and down the slopes beyond. You know, this brings up a really good point, and this was a job I had in high school, just out of high school, and there was a supervisor there, and there was a big, massive storm, and it made it really difficult for us to do our job. And I kind of stopped and was waiting for the storm to pass. And my supervisor says, no matter what, keep doing as much of your job as you possibly can so that you're ready when you can complete your job versus having to sit and waste time and not be prepared. So basically, Bilbo, has no sense of direction, but he knows a little bit about what he's supposed to be doing. So although, he may not be doing it to the best of the best that he would be doing it if the dwarves and Gandalf were with him, he's still making an attempt. So no matter what, if you find yourself in kind of you've lost tools and strategies, keep doing your job to the best of your ability, even if it's just a little bit, but don't ever just stop and wait. Stopping and waiting is bad for you. So he still wandered on out of the little high valley, over its edge and down the slopes beyond, but all the while a very uncomfortable thought was growing inside him. He wondered whether he ought not, now he had the magic ring, to go back into the horrible, horrible tunnels and look for his friends. He had just made up his mind that it was his duty, that he must turn back, and very miserable he felt about it when he heard voices. He stopped and listened. It did not sound like goblins, so he crept forward carefully. He was on a stony path winding downwards, with a rocky wall on his left hand. On the other side of the ground sloped, he's on a stony path, winding downwards, with a rocky wall on the left hand, and on the other side the ground sloped away, and there were dells below the level of the path, overhung with bushes and low trees down here. In one of these dells, under the bushes, people were talking. So mountain, path, and then the trees, if you've ever been hiking. He crept still nearer, and suddenly he saw peering between two big boulders ahead with a red hood on. It was Balin doing lookout. He could have clapped and shouted for joy, but he did not. He still had the ring on, for fear of meeting something unexpected and unpleasant. And he saw that Balin was looking straight at him without noticing him. I will give them all a surprise, he thought, as he crawled into the bushes at the edge of the dell. Gandalf was arguing with the dwarves. They were discussing all that had happened to them in the tunnels and were wondering and debating what to do now. The dwarves were grumbling, and Gandalf was saying that they could not possibly go on with their journey, leaving Mr. Baggins in the hands of the goblins, without trying to find out if he was alive or dead, and without trying to rescue him. After all, he is my friend, said the wizard, and not a bad little chap. I feel responsible for him. I wish to goodness you had not lost him. That's funny. It's kind of another accusation, but Gandalf was there with them as well. He's, it was just everybody got lost. I'm going to pause there and stop. It's January 1st. To be honest, I did not feel like reading today, but you have to keep yourself to a schedule. You have to do things sometimes that you don't want to do. And usually when you do the things that you don't want to do, but you know are good for you, you have good things. I hope you all have a wonderful day.